right, so now I'm just going to make this kind of a shorter um, lecture for the last part of this chapter. This picture illustrates well the complexities we were talking about, nationalities within the Austrian Empire at the time, okay? So we see here Germans, Czechs, Slovaks, Italians, Poles, Slovenes, Croats and Serbs, Romanians, basically Ukrainians and Hungarians, okay? And imagine what nationalism does for a concept like this. It just so happens that, look at the issue of Ukraine and Russia right now. Look at the way that Russia is trying to assert the way it's intervening. There's Russians in Ukraine that he's claiming that he's defending and that this is historically a part of Russian territory. And then you have Ukrainians who want independence and don't want to be a part of Russia. And then you have European powers that would see that to their advantage to support separatists because it's going to obviously weaken Russia to not have more territory incorporated into its sphere, which the Russians are going to know, and henceforth the whole issue of human rights and rights to self-determination are really going to be guised in Ukrainians being caught in the middle of a power play between European powers and Russian superpower, right? You feel me on this? Okay? And so the world hasn't really kind of solidified all this very well. The Ottoman Empire also is close to here, and we're going to see later on that the Middle East breaks apart, and many of the fights and problems that it has is also kind of similar. You have these Kurds in the north that became a part of Iraq. The Kurds also became a part of Turkey. The Kurds became a part of Iran, and there's parts of Syria. And yet they think that they're one entire nation. But if one of those becomes independent, then the other ones in the other country wants to be independent, and the other countries don't want to have that happen. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Same kind of problem. So I just want to kind of also remind you that the things going on in the Middle East right now are the exact same thing. There's one Israeli historian who called it the post-Ottoman syndrome of the Middle East. And he's talking about when the Ottoman Empire is going to fall in after World War I, and essentially create the same kind of issues that have plagued Europe. Okay? Just thought I would point that out. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the Crimean War. The Crimean War, not known about too much. Russia wanted to expand its imperial might by advocating itself as a leader of Pan-Slavism at the expense of minor little groups. In other words, to say, hey, we are the defender of all Slavic peoples, and we're going to co-opt all movements in benefit of supporting this. And Christians, by the way, and we're going to assert this at the expense of those Turkish Muslims. And there was a fear of this creating a lack of balance of power, something that, for instance, Bismarck always talked about. But Britain and France are going to unify with the Turkish Muslims at the expense of Russia. And I just wanted to point this out because this is why I do not believe in the clash of civilizations ultimately. At the end of the day, states have interests, and they can claim that, we stand for this one, total ideal. But really, sometimes, you have ironic clashing sets of interests that defy the official ideologies. I mean, Saudi Arabia and Israel both talk mess on each other, but they're both quite horrified by the rise of power of Iran right now. And both are very angry at the United States for trying to work peace with Iran. Now, the United States officially is, you could say, a policy that's anti-Iranian. But guess what? There's this thing called the Rising Islamic State, which is the main country in the world that would be opposed to the Islamic State that's rising, that is taking power in parts of Syria and Iraq, is actually Iran. And so Iran and the United States officially have to talk mess on each other, but probably behind closed doors, they're realizing that they might need each other. And that might make other nations like Israel and Saudi Arabia, who get a lot of support from us, and who are actually, Israel's the #1 military U.S. recipient, and then Saudi Arabia gets quite a bit of support, feeling marginalized and threatening their interests. And so then you see all these clashes of interests. And then on the domestic sphere, it's not popular to do something favorable to Iran at the expense of Israel, and we'll not talk about Saudi Arabia, and so you can create a domestic stuff here. Why I'm bringing this all up right now is just to try to show you is that when you look to the past, we see the same kind of patterns and problems, and the way that politics can be so confusing, but it all makes sense when we can pin it down, but it takes work. Just like, if I really gave the due time to each of these little domestic conflicts here that we were just discussing, it would take too long. And so that's why I want you to read that, but I want you to kind of see the significance. I want you to see how also Russia remembers these things, and how Europeans, they know these things. These conflicts still resonate now. And they explain a lot of things that are going on now. And this is something I want you to understand, because as Americans, we've avoided a lot of this stuff, but at the same time, we need to get hip, Okay, so I'm ending it there, and we're going to move on, and I'm going to kind of do the same approach, but maybe even a little bit more concise, on chapter 23, the coming of mass politics.